History was written by the victors, and when history is written by conquerors, it is often a story of erasure, not of truth. For centuries, the Western world has told us that the Americas were discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492, but the real story begins far earlier, with the Moors, the Mali Empire, and ancient civilizations that charted seas, built empires, and left footprints across the globe long before Europe's rise. This is not just history. This is the hidden prelude to the world we live in today. The Moors, African and Arab descendants of ancient kingdoms, ruled Spain for over 700 years. From 711 to 1492, they transformed Europe from darkness into light. When the rest of Europe struggled in feudal poverty, the Moors built aqueducts, universities, observatories, and vast libraries. Córdoba alone had nearly 1 million manuscripts, while the largest libraries in Europe had barely a few hundred. It was under Moorish rule that Europe learned algebra, chemistry, astronomy, even the very compass that would guide Columbus westward. And yet, as their empire fell in 1492, the knowledge they preserved would be stolen, weaponized, and used to conquer the very world they once explored. Across the Sahara, another empire rose, Mali, the jewel of West Africa, under the rule of Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever live. Mali commanded wealth that stunned the known world. When Musa journeyed to Mecca in 1324, his caravan stretched so long, it shifted the economy of entire nations with gold alone. But the Mali Empire was not just wealth, it was wisdom. Universities in Timbuktu taught law, medicine, mathematics, and the stars. And with that wisdom came something greater, the power of navigation. Centuries before Columbus, Mali's explorers set sail. The Arab historian Al-Umari records how Mansa Musa's predecessor sent fleets of ships into the Atlantic, never to return, except for one survivor who claimed to have found new lands across the sea. Africa's presence in the Americas is no myth. It is fact buried beneath layers of denial. Linguists have traced African words in native tongues. Archaeologists have unearthed artifacts of Egyptian origin in the Grand Canyon. The colossal Olmec heads of Mexico bear features unmistakably African. And the maps, the Piri-Reis, the Cantino Planisphere, the Dieppe maps, all show the Americas before Columbus. How could Europe chart lands it had not yet seen? Because others had already been there. Moorish, African, and Phoenician navigators had sailed these waters, leaving behind fragments of truth in a world desperate to forget them. The lie of discovery was necessary for empire. For if the world knew Africa had touched these shores first, Europe's narrative of supremacy would collapse. 1492 was no coincidence. The year Columbus set sail was the same year the Moors were expelled from Spain. The same year libraries were burned, mosques were converted, and history was rewritten. The Catholic monarchs who sent Columbus across the Atlantic were the very rulers who destroyed Moorish Granada. And what did Columbus carry with him? Moorish maps, Moorish astronomy, Moorish mathematics. The so-called Age of Discovery was not discovery at all. It was theft. Theft of knowledge, theft of lands, theft of memory. The first chapter of America's story does not begin with slaves in chains. It begins with Moors as sovereigns, as explorers, as men of science and spirit. The first Africans to set foot on American soil were not captives, but kings. Not commodities, but navigators. Yet as Europe rewrote the record, Africa's role was stripped away. The narrative of weakness replaced the truth of greatness. The chains of slavery could only be justified if the world forgot the crowns that came before. We stand today on the edge of awakening. To reclaim the truth is to reclaim identity. To know that Africa was here before Columbus is to know that the story of America is not one of European discovery, but of Moorish and African legacy. That the Americans had Moorish and Africans already here, whose names were eventually changed. It's a wave of awakening happening and more to come. Before America declared independence, another war had already been fought and forgotten. It was not a war of colonies against Britain, but of native peoples, Moors, and free Africans resisting the advance of European empires. Spain, Portugal, France, Britain, the Netherlands, Sweden, and even Russia carved at the land like vultures, battling for territory that was not theirs to begin with. What textbooks call exploration was invasion. What they call settlement was conquest. This was the First World War, and it happened right here on American soil. Spain and Portugal struck first. Armed with papal decrees, they divided the world between them as if native nations were invisible. Spanish conquistadors marched with the cross in one hand and the sword in the other, enslaving, baptizing, and erasing. Portugal trafficked Africans into bondage while forging alliances with tribes to divide and conquer. Together, they laid the blueprint for empire: faith as weapon, trade as control, conquest as destiny. France soon entered, embedding traders among tribes, marrying into families, and seeding alliances. Britain built forts and colonies, spreading disease and law together. When the French and Indian War erupted, it was not just Europe fighting Europe. It was native nations forced to pick sides in a war they never asked for. The soil of America became a battlefield long before 1776. The Netherlands seized Caribbean islands and river mouths. Sweden planted flags along the Delaware. Russia crept across Alaska, testing the edge of a world they barely understood. All of Europe wanted a piece of America, and all of it came at the expense of those who had lived here for thousands of years. These were not isolated battles. They were a single campaign, the First World War against the custodians of this land. Yet within this war hides another truth. Moorish influence did not vanish with Spain's fall. Moors and free blacks fought alongside tribes, preserving fragments of sovereignty. And before George Washington, before 1776, a man of Moorish descent, John Hanson, became the first president under the Articles of Confederation. His existence proves what history denies. Moors helped shape the earliest foundations of American government, even as Europe tried to erase them. The hidden First World War was not just muskets and bayonets. It was war on memory itself. Native tribes decimated, Moorish presence denied, African sovereignty rewritten into slavery alone. By 1776, when America raised its flag, the war for history had already been won by Europe, and the victors buried the story under centuries of silence. But silence is not eternal. The truth rises again, like smoke from the fires they once lit. The hidden First World War is the chapter they never wanted told.